Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Angels of Christmas by Susan Robb. Narrated by Nan Mcnamara. Introduction. What images first come to your mind when you think of Christmas? Is it of your family gathered around the Christmas tree on Christmas morning, hanging ornaments together and recalling the delight of seeing again your favorite decorations that had been boxed away for the rest of the year? Memories of sitting atop Santa's lap as a child, or watching the joy on your own children's faces as they carry on that old tradition. Or perhaps singing Silent Night in a darkened sanctuary during candlelight services on Christmas Eve with friends and family. Whatever images of Christmas we think of first, as Christians, our imaginations do not take us far before visions of angels appear in our minds. For most, thoughts of Christmas almost always include gossamer images of winged angels appearing to Mary, Joseph, the shepherds keeping watch over their flocks by night, and if we really dig deep in our memories, to Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. Yes, Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth, and the angel that brings them the good news of their son's impending birth are an integral part of Jesus' birth story as well. We cannot relate the Christmas story, watch a Christmas pageant, or even walk city streets or the aisles of otherwise secular department stores during the Christmas season without encountering images of angels. Some of our most enduringly popular Christmas movies, such as It's a Wonderful Life and The Bishop's Wife, have angels in central roles. They appear not with wings, but as everyday human beings sent to earth to teach the meaning of Christmas and offer hope to distracted, misguided individuals who have lost their way, to bring hope and light into the bleakness of their lives. Angels are not unique to the Christmas story. They appear throughout the Bible during significant moments in the history of God's people. However, their role as God's messengers of hope, peace, salvation, direction, warning, and especially of Jesus' identity, make their words in the birth narratives of Jesus messages we all need to hear, heed, and claim today in this season of Advent. The word Advent comes from the Latin word adventus, which means coming. Specifically, it referred to a visitation by the emperor, an event that required people to make special preparations. During Advent, as Christians have done for centuries, we prepare and wait expectantly for the coming of our King, for the birth of the Christ child in the midst of our lives and hearts once again, for the return of Christ, whose arrival was announced by John the Baptist, inaugurated at Jesus' birth, and evidenced in his life on earth, and for the consummation of his kingdom. The angels in the stories of Jesus' birth are significant to our time of waiting and preparation in Advent. That's really the reason for this book. Angels are not just beautiful decorations for our trees. They are more than the coolest costumes for the Christmas pageant. But it's dangerously easy to reduce them to such roles, even in our formal celebrations. Think about the Christmas hymns we know well. Notice how many of them include, or even begin, with the angels. Hark, the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plain. It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. The one role angels have in each of these hymns, singing, is not mentioned at all in the Gospel stories. I don't wish to burst any bubbles here, but in the Gospel accounts, angels don't sing, they speak. Of all the most familiar Christmas hymns, the only one I can recall that makes this key distinction begins like this. The first Noel, the angels did say, came to certain poor shepherds in fields where they lay. The word Noel is borrowing from French that refers both to news and to a birth. In the Middle Ages, it came to mean specifically the news of the birth of Jesus. The angels in the birth narratives of Jesus aren't actually depicted as singing. Yet we refer to the words of praise that Jesus' mother, Mary, Luke chapter 1, verses 46 through 55, and Zechariah, Luke chapter 1, verses 68 through 79, offered at the announcements of their sons' births as songs, due to their beautiful poetic nature. The words of the angelic host in Luke chapter 2 have similarly captured our imaginations, and those of the writers of our favorite hymns, as a song of the good news of Christ's birth. So, with no bubbles burst, we can join with the angelic chorus in singing the good news of Christ's birth. This book attempts to bring our focus during Advent back to the central role of angels as bringers of news. The word angel derives from the Greek angelos, meaning messenger. The angels of Christmas came to deliver important messages to people who were hoping for God to intervene in a mighty way, both in the fears and darkness of their personal lives and in their world. One of those angels reminded the doubt-plagued recipient of his message, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God," Luke chapter 1, verse 19, implying that the messages the angels bring are to be heeded as carefully and met with the same awe and wonder as messages that come straight from God. More than that, messages from God through the angels demand a response from us by word or action. So, over the course of this book, we will discuss the messages delivered by the angels regarding the birth of Jesus. We will carefully study and hopefully ponder them in our hearts, as Mary did, not just for the 4 weeks of the Advent season, but far beyond. We will also examine how these human recipients responded to the messages from God. And I hope we will ask ourselves not just how we would have responded had we encountered the angels in these gospel stories, but how we recognize and respond to the angels that I believe are still in our midst. Just as they did 2,000 years ago, the angels of Christmas still bring good news of great joy for all the people, including you and me. And the tidings they bring can allay our own fears and bring great joy into a hurting world desperately in need of hope. Luke chapter 2, verse 10. Upon hearing such news, whether it's for the first time or the 1,000th time, the question for us today is, how will we respond? Angels in the Bible. The appearance of angels in the Hebrew Scriptures didn't necessarily conform to the way we depict angels in Christian art and in our Christmas pageants. When the parents of John the Baptist, Elizabeth and Zechariah, and Joseph, Mary, and the shepherds encountered angels, they could process what they were seeing and hearing based on what they knew of the appearances of heavenly beings in their own scriptures, which we know as the Old Testament. So, to better understand their reactions, we need to understand how angels were presented in Bible stories that predate Jesus' arrival by many centuries. While the word angel in Greek, as noted earlier, means messenger, in Hebrew, the language of the Old Testament, no single word precisely corresponds to the word angel. Instead, there is a rich and varied vocabulary to describe these celestial beings. They are called sons of God, heavenly beings, and hosts. See, for example, Genesis chapter 5, verse 22, Job chapter 1, verse 6, Psalm 103, verse 21. They don't necessarily appear with wings and wearing white robes. It's not even clear who they are. Genesis chapter 18 describes an occasion when 3 men show up at the camp of Abraham and Sarah. Displaying hospitality was an essential part of ancient Near Eastern culture, so in this narrative, Abraham invites the visitors to stay, while Sarah prepares them a veritable feast. After they tell the couple that they will have a son in their old age, Abraham must realize that he is in the presence of heavenly messengers. The text abruptly shifts in tone, and the Lord begins to speak. Was God there all along as one of the 3? Were these men angels? It's not clear, but the author of Hebrews hints that they were angels. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2. When Abraham is preparing to sacrifice his son Isaac, a command that, according to the narrative in Genesis chapter 22, comes directly from God. The order not to follow through is given by the angel of the Lord, who then reaffirms God's promise to make Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars. There's similar blurring between God and angels in the stories of Abraham's grandson, Jacob. In Genesis chapter 28, he camps overnight. Jacob sees a stairway to heaven, one of those thin places where our realm and the heavenly realm come close, with angels going up and down. Then the Lord appears directly and speaks to Jacob. Later, when he is once again camped alone on his way back to face his brother Esau, Jacob wrestles all night with a stranger who gives Jacob a new name, Israel, which means wrestles with God, and whom Jacob understands to have been God. Angels function in a variety of ways as messengers. An angel comforts the slave girl Hagar after she runs away from Sarah. As with Jesus, centuries later, angels announce the coming births of Isaac, Ishmael, and Samson. Genesis chapter 18, verse 10, chapter 16, verse 10, Judges chapter 13, verses 2 through 5. Angels commission people to a specific task. Think of the angel of God who appears to Moses from the burning bush. They speak God's words to prophets, redirect or guide someone's actions at a critical moment, or act in ways that offer protection for God's people. The list could go on, but we will discover that the angels in the birth narratives of Jesus functioned in many of these roles as well. Their appearances in Matthew and Luke's Gospels are meant to echo similar or parallel stories from the Hebrew Scriptures, connecting the old stories of God's faithfulness and action in the history of Israel with God's continued faithfulness and new action through the life of Jesus. But angels can also be frightening bringers of bad news, not good news of great joy for all the people. Luke chapter 2, verse 10. God sends a heavenly being, a cherub, with a flaming sword to prevent Adam and Eve from returning after their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. Genesis chapter 3, verse 24. Two of the angels who visit Abraham's camp travel on to Sodom, where they encounter his nephew Lot, who also shows them great hospitality and invites them to stay overnight in his home. Instead of welcoming these strangers, the men of Sodom try to abduct the men from Lot's home to bring them violent harm. So, the angels bring about the destruction of the city as punishment for its wickedness against the strangers in their midst and for its known prevalent injustice. An angel with a drawn sword blocks the path of the pagan diviner Balaam. At first, only Balaam's donkey can see the menacing angel. But then the Lord opens Balaam's eyes, and he bows his head to the ground in fear and submission. Numbers chapter 22, verses 21 through 34. Given these stories, it is little wonder that Zechariah, Elizabeth, Mary, Joseph, and the shepherds might have been perplexed and frightened by the angels' appearances, and why they, like the women who encountered them at Jesus' empty tomb that first Easter morning, needed to hear the reassuring words, "Don't be afraid." Are angels real? And does it matter? In conversations I've had with people through the years, I have found that some are wholehearted believers in angels, while others' sense of logic does not permit their embracing that sort of belief in supernatural beings. For the latter group, angels belong in the same category as Santa Claus, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, and the Easter Bunny. I find that some of these people ascribe the appearance of angels to a literary device used to support the biblical author's theological message. Others have walked away from the faith entirely because the Bible includes angels, as well as historical archaeological inaccuracies and supernatural occurrences that do not mesh with their knowledge base and reliance on reason. And that is tragic, because we need to understand that the biblical authors of the first century and earlier were not writing to an audience that expected absolute historical accuracy. They were writing in the literary styles of their day to people who viewed events through the lens of their own cultures. In particular, the Gospel accounts of Jesus' birth that we will read in Luke and Matthew seek to help us find the points of connection between the good news of the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus to God's saving action in the stories of Israel, and to the Gentile world into which the early church had spread. If you're skeptical about the identity of angels, you're not alone. Even in Jesus' era, faithful people were divided on the belief in angels. See Acts chapter 23, verse 8. But whether you are a devoted believer, a wistful hoper, one who sees the inclusion of angels in biblical narratives as mostly literary device, or purely a skeptic, you can still experience through their messages the grace, power, hope, awe, and mystery of what God was and is doing in the world through the Incarnation. This study is not an apologetic for the reality of angels. Instead, I intend to focus on the role of angels in the birth narratives of Jesus, what their messages tell us about the one born in Bethlehem, and his role in the salvation of the world. And that's good news for all people. Each of the 4 chapters in this book, corresponding with the 4 weeks of Advent, connects us to human beings who received messages from angels. Zechariah and Elizabeth, Mary, Joseph and the Magi, and the shepherds. As we explore together the richness of these stories, we'll pay particular attention not just to what God's messengers said, but also to how these people responded to the message. That's where the stories connect to us. God did not stop attempting to communicate with human beings once the Bible was written. Just because we don't read stories from our own time of people seeing angels filling the night sky or encountering men in dazzling white robes, that doesn't mean God no longer sends messengers to interrupt our everyday existence. As you'll learn in this book, some people are convinced they have been in the presence of an angel whose message brought them hope and strength, or even changed the direction of their lives. Others have wondered, after an unexpected encounter with a stranger, whether they might have been visited by an angel. I love the spiritual advice that the writer of Hebrews, reflecting this sensibility, gives to his readers. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2. Angels in the world. Whether or not you believe in the existence of divine beings who can assume human appearance, here's what matters most, what I want you to take from this volume. God still reaches out to us through messengers, whether they're heavenly or purely human, complete strangers or people we know well. There are times in your life and mine when, in the words of the old spiritual, God is trying to tell you something. How can we orient ourselves to those moments so we can grasp what God is saying? Once we comprehend the moment and the message, how will we respond? And finally, how will we perform our own part in this unending story of the arrival of the Prince of Peace, God arriving to experience life as one of us? How will we convey what we have heard and seen to the broken places and beleaguered people around us? How will we spread the good news to all people that the kingdom is here, and we are invited to live in it together as members of the beloved community? How do we go from being shepherds who receive the good news to serving as angels who share it, who allay fears and provide guidance for God's people? I'm so glad you've joined me on this journey of discovery this Advent season, as we open these beautiful narratives in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. As we prepare our hearts for the birth of the Christ child once again in our lives this season, and as we wait his return with eager anticipation, may we all listen closely to what God has to say to us through the messages of the angels of Christmas. As we hear anew these ancient stories, my hope is that we come away from this study transformed by the wonder and joy of Christ's birth, and by a renewed sense of purpose in response to their messages. May we, too, make connections between what God has done in the past not only in the history of God's people, but in our own lives as well. And may we embrace whatever new thing God is calling us to through the gift of the one who came to bring light and life into the world at Christmas. Chapter 1. Standing in the Presence of God. Gabriel and Zechariah. In the days of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly order of Abijah. His wife was a descendant of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Both of them were righteous before God, living blamelessly according to all the commandments and regulations of the Lord. But they had no children, because Elizabeth was barren, and both were getting on in years. Once when he was serving as priest before God, and his section was on duty, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and offer incense. Now at the time of the incense offering, the whole assembly of the people was praying outside. Then there appeared to him an angel of the Lord, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was terrified, and fear overwhelmed him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will name him John. You will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He must never drink wine or strong drink. Even before his birth, he will be filled with the Holy Spirit. He will turn many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. With the spirit and power of Elijah, he will go before him to turn the hearts of parents to their children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Zechariah said to the angel, "How will I know that this is so? For I am an old man, and my wife is getting on in years." The angel replied, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. But now, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time, you will become mute, unable to speak, until the day these things occur." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondered at his delay in the sanctuary. When he did come out, he could not speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the sanctuary. He kept motioning to them and remained unable to speak. When his time of service was ended, he went to his home. After those days, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months she remained in seclusion. She said, "This is what the Lord has done for me when he looked favorably on me and took away the disgrace I have endured among my people." Luke chapter 1, verses 5 through 25. Christmas Eve of 2001 is as clear in my mind as if it were yesterday. I had been attending seminary just over a year and joined our home church staff a few months earlier. Highland Park United Methodist Church is very large, and at that time had a clergy staff of nearly 20 ministers. As in all churches, Christmas Eve was an all-hands-on-deck event, offering 16 services at our main campus alone. We often rotated associate ministers and those in the ordination process in liturgical roles in various services. But I was in what you might call my rookie year. So I was shocked and honored beyond belief when our senior minister invited me to serve as liturgist in 3 of our Christmas Eve candlelight services. There were many other more qualified people to choose from. How could I have been so fortunate to have been selected for this honor? The invitation and the evening itself were among the most humbling, sacred, awe-inspiring, and, to be honest, fear-inducing moments of my early ministry. Christmas Eve is such a holy night that it always fills me with a certain awe. As a minister, you want everyone to experience the presence of God in a mighty way, and you desire to represent God to those you are serving in such a way that God's grace and love come shining through your words, presence, gestures, and actions. That responsibility should strike a healthy fear and sense of awe in all of us. It certainly did for me on that evening. But there was also the fear of messing up. No one wants to fall on her face, either literally or figuratively, in front of several thousand people. In preparation for the evening, I was fitted for and ordered my first clergy robe. I also wrote and rewrote prayers and rehearsed climbing the stairs to the pulpit and reading the Christmas scriptures over and over and again. Finally, I practiced how the candles representing the light of Christ should be lit, just before the singing of Silent Night, when they should be shared by walking the aisles and lighting others' candles on the first stanza, and finally, when they should be lifted, last stanza. When Christmas Eve finally arrived, I carefully donned my vestments for the first time, exhibiting an outward sign of God's unique call and claim on my life. It truly was a holy moment for me. I had served the church in many capacities before, but this act was symbolically fulfilling a new call and a new way of living out my faith. The presence of God was palpable for me that evening. Toward the end of the service, as is always the case on Christmas Eve, all the lights were turned off in the sanctuary. The only light remaining was the tiny flame of the Christ candle on the Advent wreath, reaching up into the massive darkness of the cavernous Gothic sanctuary. From the Christ candle, the senior pastor lit his candle, then shared that light with me. We then slowly walked the center aisle, sharing the light of Christ with a person on each pew we passed. Each person who received the light shared it with the next person in the pew, and slowly, light began to flicker and replaced the retreating darkness. The senior minister and I raised our candles and began to sing, "Silent night, holy night, wondrous star, lend thy light." Everyone else in the room joined us, filling the sanctuary with the light we all received from Christ. Tears filled my eyes, as they do every year now during the third verse of Silent Night. But gone was any fear that I had brought into the room that evening. My angst had been replaced with wonder, joy, and peace. I sensed the same was true for everyone present that evening. I had come seeking to serve God that night, feeling honored, humble, awestruck, and a little afraid. And I left feeling even more honored, humble, awestruck, and full of wonder and joy. That range of emotions, it seems to me, was similar to what happened to the priest Zechariah as he came to serve God in the temple over 2,000 years ago. An unbelievable day in the temple. When we ponder the Christmas story, Zechariah isn't the first name that typically comes to mind. Actually, his name might not come to mind at all. We are more likely to remember his wife, Elizabeth, whom Luke describes as a relative of Mary, the mother of Jesus. But Zechariah and Elizabeth both hold an important place in the story of Jesus' birth. As the scripture reminds us, Zechariah and Elizabeth lived in the time of King Herod the Great. The author of Luke, who informs his readers that he seeks to provide an orderly account of the life of Jesus, Luke chapter 1, verses 1 and 3, also loves to set the historical stage for us. Zechariah and Elizabeth, like all the Jews in Judea in that era, lived under the oppression of the Roman Empire and Herod, its despotic puppet king. Zechariah was a priest from the order of Abijah, and his wife was a descendant of Aaron, Moses' brother. Part of the law given to Moses on Mount Sinai ordained that Aaron be a priest, along with all of his male descendants from that time forward. Elizabeth is from Aaron's line, but so is Zechariah. According to 1 Chronicles chapter 24, Aaronic priests were ordered into 24 divisions, each named for Aaron's 24 sons, and they took turns serving at the altar in the temple, much as our clergy do at church. This ensured that there was always a priestly presence at the temple, and that responsibilities were fairly distributed to each division of priests. Zechariah is from the order of Abijah. It was expected that women born into priestly families would marry priests. Why is the point about the priestly lineage of Zechariah and Elizabeth important for Luke? Because he wants to underscore.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?